The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled The Modernization of eCOA Technology for Clinical Trials. My name is Edward and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes. This presentation includes a Q&A session with our speaker. This webinar is designed to be interactive and webinars work best when you are involved. So please feel free to submit questions and comments for our speaker throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If you require any assistance, please contact me at any time by sending a message using this chat panel. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. Please note that this event will be recorded and made available for future download. At this point, I'd like to thank YPrime for generating the content of this webinar. YPrime offers more than a decade of focused work with eClinical systems to expedite and improve the quality of patient engagement, clinical supplies, drug accountability, and clinical data. Cloud-based interactive response technology and electronic clinical outcome assessment platforms offer sponsors greater speed, precision, and integration in clinical trial management. Their data services and tools help sponsors bring together fragmented clinical research data into contextual information they can act on. YPrime's technology and service offerings enable sponsors to move faster and more efficiently to their next development milestone. I'd like to introduce our speaker for today's webinar. As Senior Director, Mike Hughes leads development and operations for YPrime's eCOA technology services and the teams responsible for implementation. For more than a decade, Mike has been actively involved in the evolution of mobile health solutions for clinical outcome assessments. Prior to joining YPrime in 2015, he served as Director of Project Delivery for an eCOA provider. Mike began his career as an application developer for Exact Software, a provider of manufacturing resource planning software for the apparel industry. And at this point, I'd like to hand over the presentation to Mike Hughes.
All right. Thank you very much, Edward. And thank you, everyone, for joining YPrime's discussion about the modernization of eCOA. This discussion focuses on areas that suppliers should consider to alleviate pain points expressed by eCOA adopters. We're going to take a look back at how things have been done in the past and try to identify some improvements that can be made and gaps that should be filled. And during this webinar, you'll hear some of the ways that we propose this can be done. As Edward stated, we have about 60 minutes set aside for today's call, but I'll only take about 30 minutes of your time with the slides, and then we'll leave the rest for Q&A afterwards. So let's get started. So I wanted to take a brief look at where paper and electronic diaries started and how they have evolved over time. During my 11 years in the eCOA industry, I've seen a lot of things change. Now, many have changed for the better, but some have changed for the worse. And during this presentation, I'm going to discuss how we can take advantage of the better while leaving the worst behind. So as you can see on this slide, patient diaries have been utilized in clinical trials for some time now, but technology wasn't introduced until the late 90s when electronic versions of these diaries were made available on PDA devices such as Palm Pilots. ePro adoption was a bit slow in the early stages of the industry, and it wasn't until around 2009 when FDA guidance began to suggest that electronic data capture was actually more accurate than paper. And in 2010, the ePro Consortium was established, which began to evolve the standards for the industry as the return on investment was proven. I think we can all agree that adoption has significantly increased, so much so that in recent years, ePro was rebranded as eCOA to incorporate not only patient-reported outcomes, but clinician and observer as well. This increased adoption makes it clear that we not only need to continue to increase eco awareness, but we also need to focus on the continued modernization of the technology. So we all know that change in the pharmaceutical industry does not happen overnight, and it doesn't always come easily. But historical data does show that eCOA popularity and adoption is increasing. And although adoption has increased, there's still quite a few challenges to overcome to make eCOA a standard so that study teams look forward to using it rather than feeling like they're being forced to use it. See, the advantage of committees such as the ePro Consortium is that it's a pre-marketing, non-competitive collaboration between eCOA vendors and sponsors, where everybody's working towards the same goal, eCOA adoption across the board. And these types of collaborations give us the chance to work with vendors as well as the FDA to standardize eCOA implementation and discover new and better ways to capture reliable data. There's been a lot of time and effort spent on proving the value of eCOA versus paper. But now that the research does show that the upfront cost of eCOA far outweighs the quality of paper, sponsors are actually willing to account for this cost in their budgets. But now we need to shift our focus towards making sure that the experience of using eCOA is as easy as paper to ensure that sites are fully engaged in trials that are utilizing this technology. So today we're going to touch on a few trends that are helping to make adoption a little bit easier. We'll talk about how devices have evolved over time. We'll discuss how data capture options have become more readily available, how interface and experience play a pivotal role in how sites and subjects react to the devices that they're using, about how data integration is no longer just nice to have, it's an integral part of every trial, the growing influence of agile methodologies in delivery, and how these methodologies can accelerate delivery and quality of your project, and how we can make users' lives easier by giving them direct access to support, such as manuals and help desk agents. So hardware has come a long way since eCOA burst onto the scene in the late 90s. Now, our early PDAs such as Palm Pilots were, leaps and bounds ahead of paper. They lack some fundamental functionality like color and connectivity. With devices now being more affordable and durable, there's been less discussion about the upfront cost of eCOA. Devices are also now lighter and more powerful than ever, which not only reduces a user's fatigue, but it increases the user experience while completing diaries. However, while there has been progression in device capabilities, there's been a lack of progression within the eCOA industry to incorporate these newer capabilities. Like if a patient is willing to utilize their personal Wi-Fi network, shouldn't their eCOA device make that as easy as possible for them to do? And shouldn't we increase functionality by utilizing a device's camera to capture images that are relevant to a trial, or use that same camera to scan barcodes or QR codes to track drug accountability? Phones now have sensors built in that track everything from a user's steps and their heart rate and other metrics. So why don't we capture that data and analyze it? The more data we can capture, the better off we're going to be, right? Incorporating these types of features not only broadens the range of data that can be captured within a trial, but it also increases a patient's engagement by interacting with them in a way that's far more interesting than the standard question and answer format. If we can take advantage of today's technology to increase engagement and compliance, I think we owe it to ourselves to make every effort to do so. So we no longer need to be as concerned about a subject's comfort level using a mobile device to capture these patient-reported outcomes. And it's this comfort level that lends itself to take advantage of today's technology and the varied ways that data may be recorded, whether it be via a handheld device, a tablet, the web, or even a mobile app. eCOA technology should be nimble enough to allow sponsors to take advantage of these modalities without incurring any additional cost. It's my opinion that suppliers' ability to be flexible helps reduce the paper as a backup, air quotes there, discussion that comes up far too often in the eCOA world. This type of foresight will help sponsors get ahead of scenarios where there's problems with a device, perceived or real, where site users or subjects are unable to access the device to enter data and decide to record responses on paper. It will minimize the conversations that try to determine what needs to be done to take the data that was captured on paper to have it transcribed into an electronic format and then source data verified. I think the logical solution to this is a web backup option that should be part of every standard eCOA offering. This basic backup solution would allow a user to access the system using the same credentials they would on a device, select the entry they want to capture, and then record their responses. These entries are then flagged as a backup, and the appropriate parties can be notified via the system that a backup solution was used and that some intervention may be necessary. This approach gives teams and statisticians the ability to gain true metrics on how many times this solution was used, and then can rely on the accuracy of the entry without the delay of transcription and verification. So there's two popular approaches to software delivery. There's waterfall and there's agile. Now, waterfall breaks developing and delivering into 4 stages: requirements gathering, design, coding, and testing. But the problem is, true to its name, in waterfall, each step needs to be completed before the next can start. Whereas agile is just that. It's agile. It's adaptable. And this agile approach is a more fluid delivery approach. It allows teams to document and test as they go, delivering a working product early and often. Agile development has been gaining popularity in the eCOA delivery space, and rightfully so. I mean, the main idea behind the agile approach is to deliver business value immediately in the form of working software, and then continue delivering value in regular increments. Focusing on working software over comprehensive documentation allows sponsors to see progress and give input in the design process. This not only eliminates bugs, but it also minimizes confusion come time for acceptance testing. So how can we expect a non-technical member of a sponsor team to read a technical document and then interpret that into working software? If I hand a document to someone for review and approval, it adds no value if that person's left to their own accord to interpret that software with no point of reference. We're much better served if everyone agrees on the look and the feel and the behavior of the system firsthand, and then approves the specifications based on that. If our goal is to eliminate paper in clinical trials, then why in the world are systems reviewed and approved based solely on a paper document? So let's talk a little bit about integration. If you think back to when mobile phones were first made available, all you could do with those phones was make a phone call, and you could barely make a phone call. If you wanted to watch a movie or play a game or listen to music, that means you would have had to use a TV, a video game console, and a radio. But as phones evolved, that began to change as more and more features were incorporated into one device. Now you can watch a movie while checking email, texting a friend, searching the web, all from one device at the same time. So shouldn't our eCOA systems follow that same pattern? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that you should have one vendor that offers every service for you, but what I am saying is that your vendor should be able to seamlessly integrate with every other system that you're using in your trial. If your patient identifiers are created in the IRT system, shouldn't your eCOA platform consume them without the need to recreate them on a device? And if your EDC system relies on your eCOA data to make time-sensitive decisions about eligibility, then your eCOA system better push that data as soon as it's possible. Integration's really no longer an optional feature for your projects. We're now at the point that without seamless integration, you really have no shot to properly support your trials. In this day and age, we should not have to pick up a phone to find out where your data is. It should be available to you whenever and wherever you need it. And the sooner we get to this point, the faster and more efficient your trials are going to run. All right, this is the slide that I could sit here and talk about all day. I love talking about how to build nice looking systems that are easy for everyone to use, but I'll try and contain myself and stay within the boundaries of the webinar. So as we continue to push eCOA adoption, it's very important that we focus on the end user. And while user interface is an important piece of the system, it's not the only piece that needs attention. If we sacrifice function for form, then users are going to have trouble navigating through your device. But by focusing on function while still maintaining an aesthetically pleasing form, users are not only going to enjoy using your device, but it's going to allow them to complete their task quickly and accurately. So let's take, for example, a login page. So the login page is always the first point of failure for a subject because, of course, this is the first interaction they're going to have with your device. In the past, I've seen iconography used to try and visually represent the different types of roles that could access the system. And countless hours were spent finding the perfect icon to represent user types. There was an icon for the subject. There was an icon for a site user. There was a training option. There was an administrator account. Now, don't get me wrong, at the end of the day, the screen was streamlined and it was modern and it looked great. But when it was rolled out, there was a spike in help desk calls related to login credentials. You see, so much time was spent trying to find just the right icon and so little time on how a user would interpret the screen that it was overlooked how it might be hard for a user to figure out what icon to select. The subjects were selecting the site user icon by mistake, and site users were selecting the administrator account. It was a real headache that could have been avoided with some thoughtful design considerations. So when designing a system, you need to really decide who your most important user is. And in our case, most times, it's the subject. So the system should be tailored around everything we're going to be asking the subject to do and making it as easy as possible for them to do it. The login screen should default to the subject because 9 times out of 10, that's who's going to be logging in. When a secondary user is logging in, it's okay to ask them to take the initiative to switch the role because their interaction with the device is far less than our primary user. If we can make every design decision with the subject in mind, we should be able to make the subject's lives just a little bit easier. Reducing burden through thoughtful design allows us to give them the best possible experience while interacting with our device, which typically leads to the best possible data captured. And that is really all we want eCOA to represent, is the best possible data. So we have some space for a polling question here, and I'm going to hand the reins back to Edward to present that question, and then we will continue in a minute.
Thank you, Mike. That is correct. We do have a poll question right now. I'll be launching that. And audience members are encouraged to vote live on this poll question. This question asks, what's your biggest pain point with eCOA? And the options are device inventory management, data changes, access to data or information, help desk support, or no experience. Again, we encourage audience members to vote live now. This question asks, what's your biggest pain point with eCOA? Device inventory management, data changes, access to data or information, help desk support, or no experience. Great, it looks like most of our members have voted. I would now like to share the results. And most of our members selected no experience at 31%. At 20%, we have data changes. at 19%, access to data or information. And for both help desk support and device inventory management, we have 15%. And with that, I would like to hand the presentation over back to Mike.
All right, great. Thank you, Edward. So it's interesting that no experience led that poll. And it's good because the people with no experience that are attending this webinar will now know what to look out for in the next sections that we discuss. And in the next sections, we'll also address the DCFs, the data access, the help desk and inventory, to give you a couple of ways to alleviate some of those concerns. And we're going to start with the sponsor. So all of this talk about eCOA evolution, but why through all of this evolution haven't we made the sponsors' lives easier? We've spent so much time talking about devices, development, even a ketchup bottle, but not once have I mentioned the sponsor. With all of the advances in technology, why, if a sponsor is running multiple trials with the same vendor, do they need to manage multiple URLs? Are you telling me that we can't give sponsors one URL, one username, and one password to access all of their trials? It's 2017 and all eCOA vendors aren't offering single sign-on as a standard. If our goal is to get the sponsor 100% on board with eCOA, then we better figure out a way to give them full management control of everything related to their trial. It seems absurd to me that a client cannot manage their own inventory. They have to pick up a phone and ask a project manager where they stand with their inventory that's theirs. I mean, why can't they just log into the portal where they see the rest of their data in real-time inventory? Why shouldn't they be able to order and request returns directly through that same portal? I mean, we spend so much time talking about integrating data with other systems, but why are the inventory and help desk systems so siloed? If the data that we capture is owned by the sponsor, then why does the sponsor have to wait for someone to implement a data clarification?
Sorry to disturb you, Mike. There seems to be a pop-up on your page. If you just yeah, great. Thank you.
Go. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So if the data that we capture is owned by the sponsor, then why does the sponsor have to wait for someone to implement a data clarification? The system should just allow a user to raise a clarification and, depending on the type, send for the proper approvals. Once approved, the change should no longer need human interaction. It should be made by the system automatically and then audit trailed accordingly. Taking the human element out of the data clarification process saves 2 to 5 days per DCF. But more importantly, it eliminates that human error aspect of the implementation. This approach assures that the integrity of your data stays intact throughout the entirety of the project lifecycle. Shouldn't sponsors be given the tools that they need to run a successful trial? Let them easily see their trial data, manage users, manage their own inventory, and create trends to help them keep a close eye on the data that really means the most to them. I mean, they just want their trials to run smoothly. So giving them full transparency into the system allows them to not only see when things are going well, but it gives them the visibility into possible issues that may arise, giving them the best possible opportunity to mitigate any potential risk. Now, sites, on the other hand, are a little bit easier. The only thing that the sites really want is a little bit of their day back. If we can reduce the amount of time that a site user spends interacting with eCOA devices, then we can increase their willingness to use eCOA devices. There's no reason that a site user should spend time setting up subjects on a device when those subjects have already been enrolled in another system. The information should be pulled in and preloaded for them across all of their devices. I mean, there may be a case where connectivity is an issue and they have to manually enter a subject, but that should be the exception rather than the rule. All the user should need to do is take a device off the shelf, select the subject number, maybe set a preferred alarm time for that subject, and then hand the device over. And that's it. There's no need to enter all the demographic information that's already been captured. And along the same lines, if a subject has multiple tablets on hand, they shouldn't have to remember which subjects are set up on which device. Those devices should be talking to each other and sharing data between them, keeping everything in sync. I always use an example that most everybody can relate to. So for anyone on the call who owns a handheld and a tablet and uses those devices to play games, say Candy Crush, for example. Let's say you're playing an intense game of Candy Crush on your phone. You reach level 118. You're all set to take on level 119. And at this point, if you were to put down your phone, pick up your tablet, and open Candy Crush, you'd see that you're on the same level with the same amount of lives left. And this is because your devices are talking to each other, and they're sharing the data that you need to keep you moving forward. So shouldn't your eCOA platform be just as smart? High enrolling sites should not have to call their monitors to request additional hardware. They should simply be able to go into their eCOA portal and click a button to request more devices. This goes for help desk support as well. Site users should no longer need to sit on hold and wait for a help desk agent. They should be given direct access to create a help desk ticket, or even be given the ability to live chat directly with an agent through the eCOA portal. And it's these types of things that, albeit not groundbreaking technology, are the steps that need to be taken to reduce site burden in eCOA trials and just give them back a little more of their day. So I do think that we're really missing some easy ways to keep subjects engaged in trials. At the end of the day, a subject just wants to know how they're doing in the trial that they're participating in. If we can send them simple emails that tell them how they've been doing, how far along in the trial they are, and what their next step is, it would go a long way towards making them feel like they're contributing. This same message should also be displayed directly on the subject's device. After all, a subject should feel like they're a valued piece of a trial and not just a number, right? Giving the subject the ability to earn rewards or points is also a great way to ensure that they come back every day and complete their tasks. I mean, who doesn't love a little motivational feedback as they complete your diaries? Allowing them to trade those points in for some type of reward is also a great way to boost morale. Many people that are participating in these trials are sick and they just want to feel better. Overburdening them with complicated diaries doesn't help them stay engaged. A diary should be easy and intuitive for subjects. They should be able to get in and get out quickly without much thought. An eCOA device should guide the subject through rather than relying on the subject to figure out what they're supposed to do. Now, that being said, it's inevitable that a subject's going to get stuck somewhere along the way. But it shouldn't be a burden for them to find the help they need. Subjects are already holding a phone in their hand when completing a diary, so why do we force them to pick up another phone to call the help desk? They should be able to utilize their eCOA device to call the help desk. They should be able to start a live chat directly from the phone they're using directly through the application, don't you think? I mean, the more difficult issues where a simple phone call doesn't resolve the problem, a help desk agent should be able to remotely connect and walk the subject through their issue. These little things go a long way to minimize burden and frustration, keeping the patient engaged throughout the life of the trial. Now, like most software platforms, eCOA needs to continue to evolve or it will never see full acceptance. And today's eCOA is nearly unrecognizable in comparison to the early products that were introduced into the clinical trial space. As technology continues to advance, we must do everything we can to keep up with it. And you can see by looking at the landscape of the industry that things are beginning to move a little bit faster. While we still push for full adoption of BYOD trials, we've already begun to explore mHealth and sensor integration. And by expanding the types of data that we're able to capture, we also expand the options in which we have to capture it. Most recently, with the introduction of mHealth, we can now utilize sensors in patients' phones as well as wearables to capture patient health data. Now, this type of data can be used to measure performance-reported outcomes, or perf rows, which in the past may have been difficult to objectively capture. There are also some forward thinkers out there in the industry looking for ways to utilize even newer technologies, such as Apple Watches, Google Home, and Amazon Dot to capture patient-reported outcomes. And while not every one of these technologies will take hold, it is promising to see people pushing the envelope with the clinical trial space. I've touched on support topics throughout this discussion a couple times, but I wanted to summarize a few points as I feel like it's really something that gets overlooked in the study. And while it's important that the design and development of a trial run as smoothly as possible, it really doesn't end there. Typically, the design and development phase of a study lasts about 6 to 10 weeks, while a trial can run for years. And it's important to ensure that when issues arrive, it's as easy as possible for a user to get the support they need. In my experience, the only way for a user to contact the help desk was via a phone call or an email. So that meant that the user had to move away from their eCOA device to either pick up a phone and call someone or go to a computer to email the help desk. It seems inefficient, right? I mean, if they're already holding an eCOA device, which is typically a phone or a tablet, why can't they talk directly to a help desk agent? Shouldn't the device have the capability to call the help desk or even open a chat window to talk with an agent in real time? And if there's a larger issue with the device, why does the subject have to go back to the site for support? Shouldn't the agent be able to remotely connect and troubleshoot from there? If somebody's reaching out to the help desk, it probably means they've already tried to resolve their issue themselves. And it most likely means they're already frustrated. So we need to do everything in our control to ease that frustration. A site user or a subject needs to feel like the person on the other side of the phone feels their pain and is doing everything within their power to resolve the problem. It only takes one, maybe two, bad experiences with the help desk to deter people from seeking the help that they need. So we have to make sure that it's as easy as possible for all parties involved. So to summarize today's discussion, if we can just take a step back and rethink the way eCOA has been delivered in the past and make a few tweaks, eCOA can become the standard in clinical trials. While nothing I went over today is groundbreaking or cutting-edge technology, they're all things that, if done well, can have a huge impact, not only on the way that your trial is built, but also how it's received by users. eCOA innovation is driven by adoption, and by giving the features that people want and have come to expect in technology, we can gain their acceptance of the technology that we're utilizing in your clinical trials. So as promised, I left about a half hour for questions, so we will hand back to Edward to read through some questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that insightful presentation. Now, I would like to invite our audience to continue sending in their questions or comments using the questions window for the Q&A portion of this webinar. I've already received some questions, and so I'll get started with those. First question here, what has been your biggest pain point within eCOA implementation?
That's a good question. From the vendor side, the pain point's pretty consistent. It's the time of engagement. Unfortunately, eCOA engagement doesn't really start typically until the protocol is near final, which doesn't leave a ton of time to prepare for a project start. So if we see issues that may exist in a protocol related to eCOA, sometimes it's too late to provide our input. So it always comes down to timelines with eCOA. If we can get true visibility into when things are coming and the proper time to prepare, we should be able to deliver a quality eCOA project.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Another question here asks, do you envision using eCOA more at the site level or at the patient level involving remote patients?
So this is a great question, but I'm not really sure the proper response. At first glance, I guess you would say that there's far more handheld devices out in the field, but in reality, if there was one site-based trial and one home-based trial, the number of handhelds could outweigh the tablets 20 to 1. So just simply based on the use case, there's more handhelds out there. But I guess project-wise, it's probably close to 50-50 right now, maybe leaning a little bit towards home-based, but in sheer device volume, handheld wins easily. I hope I answered that question, but if not, I'm happy to have a follow-up conversation to clarify.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here from another audience member regarding BYOD implementation. Are you planning a hybrid model or full-on BYOD in the near future?
So this is one of those age-old BYOD versus provisioned topics. Always a great topic of discussion, sometimes a heated argument, but I think the main advantage to BYOD is that you save that upfront cost of buying all the devices to give the subjects. It saves you a little bit of money up front, but if you really think about it, are you ever really able to use 100% BYOD? It's hard to imagine that every subject that tries to enroll is going to have a cell phone and be willing to install an app on it to use in a clinical setting. So I have heard some discussions about eligibility criteria being written into protocols where subjects must be willing to use their own smartphones, but unless that happens, I think you're always going to need a percentage of provisioned devices just so you don't bias your subject population.
Okay, great. Another question here. This question asks, what is your solution to giving sponsors more control over device management?
So this is going to be a very YPrime specific answer because as far as I know, YPrime's the only eCOA company that hands over full inventory control to a sponsor. So we've built ourselves a custom inventory platform that lives inside of our eCOA solution. This allows us direct access to real-time inventory either at a project level or a program level. In addition, it allows sponsors to have the ability to distribute devices to projects and sites as they see fit. We also offer that device ordering capability to the sites and monitors so that they can request additional devices in return with a click of a button. And then when orders are requested through our system, which we typically require that you do, it gives everybody full visibility into exactly where your devices are, which includes UPS tracking information. It really reduces the headaches when it comes to inventory. I mean, if you think about it, in this day and age, you have to call your project manager and ask for an inventory report. And then typically call your project manager 2 days later and remind them that you need that inventory report. So it takes days instead of minutes to see what's available for you. It's a little bit silly.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Another one for you here, Mike. You mentioned agile development results in a faster delivery. Do you have metrics on the time difference between the traditional approach and agile?
So I'm glad that people are asking agile questions. It means that they actually know what agile is. And there's a ton of metrics out there that outline agile versus waterfall. But the metrics that we really measure ourselves by is when we're using agile, how fast can we deliver value to the client and get devices in patient hands to capture data? By us utilizing the agile approach, we've been able to cut up to 4 weeks off of our delivery timeline and maybe more as we continue to streamline our approach. So that's really what we measure ourselves about. It works, agile works for us, and it's allowed us to really get going fast. So they're the metrics that we measure.
Okay, I think we have another agile question here. Being agile and innovative is great. As a result of these improved methodologies, has setup of eCOA systems developing timelines improved?
It really has. I mean, the total timeline, like I said, we've been able to shave about 4 weeks off of our delivery. But just the startup timelines, getting value in the client's hands happens in the first week of a project. So we're able to sit with the client quickly and show them their project and build their project along with them directly onto a device. So using Agile allows us to spend a little bit more time with the client and let the client see a little bit more of their project right up front.
Okay, thank you. Another question here. This audience member asks, you talked about error-prone tasks. Could you give an example of something like that?
Sure. So human beings are error-prone by default, right? So anytime we introduce human interaction into eCOA, whether it be inventory management or data change clarification, there are always errors that come along with it, which is why steps have been put in place to check somebody's work. So if somebody implements a data change, somebody then has to circle back and check that change because people are error prone. So anytime that a person touches your data, it opens the window for that person to make some mistakes.
Okay, this audience member asks, shouldn't we be focusing on flexibility with the significant number of devices already in the world? I have 2 to 3 devices with me already. Adding another eCOA device for a home diary would drive me a little nuts. I'd much rather prefer to just have an app on my own device.
Absolutely, that's a great question. And the BYOD space is something we could talk about for hours. And the approach that we've taken here at YPrime is to take advantage of the same development for the same platform that works for provision devices as well as BYOD devices. So if you're overwhelmed with devices that you're managing and you just want to go BYOD to save that headache, we are completely on board with that. We're set up to download an app from the App Store and utilize that app if that works best for you, or we could take your old devices in-house and try and work with them, or we could buy new devices and provide those for your trial. So we've set ourselves up very flexible to work with the client and focus on whatever pain point bothers them the most.
Thanks for that answer, Mike. We have another audience member here asking, any open demo on eCOA and Modernization eCOA, if applicable, on site for better management?
So I'm not sure I completely understand that question, but as far as on-site demos, we are always happy to jump on a webinar or come out face-to-face and run a demo. So we are able to give access to clients to see the portal, play around with the portal, see the devices and play around with the diaries, and we can set up a demo at any point. So if that's something of interest, we can follow up offline and set something up to further discuss.
Okay, thank you for that. And another member here, this question asks, does the Agile approach with YPrime include demos of the design progress?
It does, yes, and that's the best part about Agile, right? So you get to see the things that we've been talking about, usually on a weekly basis. It really depends on your trial, so we set up what we call sprints, is where we chunk up the work that we're doing for you. And at the end of each sprint, we'll show you what we've done and discuss it and get your feedback and make any necessary adjustments from there. And at the time of kickoff meeting, we can hand you a device that can stay with you, and you can download updates to your phone real time and see them as we've developed.
Okay, thank you for that answer. This attendee is asking, how do you handle users that are not smartphone savvy?
So that has always been one of the eCOA hurdles that we need to get over. There are people that are experts with their phones. I mean, you'd be surprised at the people that are able to use their phone. My 93-year-old grandmom texts me from her iPad all the time, so she's been able to figure it out. But there are people that have that trouble. And that's why we've set up our help desk to be as flexible as possible. We can have a call, we can answer an email, we can jump on a chat with you directly, and then we can also remote in to try and guide you through how to use your phone and figure out the problem that you're having.
Okay, thank you for answering that one. And we have another one over here. When translating eCOA items, what are the main considerations regarding screen layout on a language-specific basis?
There are a lot of topics around localization that we're still working through in the industry to make as easy as possible. But we've utilized our instrument library to store scales and translations so that we're able to quickly pull them into your project. That allows us to adjust quickly and manage the screen sizes that you're utilizing in your trial. But our app is built just as that. It's an app, so it adjusts dynamically to the device that you're using. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't have to look at the screens and you can just go right to production, but it does allow us a lot quicker development time of those scales.
Thanks, Mike. I have a general question here. What has been your experience with sponsors and eCOA UAT?
So our CEO here at YPrime walks around with a shirt that says "We love UAT" on it, because our goal is to get to UAT and have as little findings as possible. And that's why we've adopted this agile approach. So we like to involve the sponsor as early as possible, to get their feedback as early as possible and get them as comfortable as possible with their platform. So by the time that we get to UAT, they've already seen it, they know how it works, and they know what it's going to do. So they're really comfortable using it. And come UAT time, we usually go out, spend a day or two with the client, walk through the device, and make sure they're comfortable.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. This viewer here asks, what has been your experience with BYOD and studies that collect primary endpoints?
So that is the hot topic, right? So that is why we don't have complete BYOD acceptance. And it's something that we're still working through with the FDA, because not everybody has bought into the BYOD approach for the primary endpoint. Now, there has been some sponsors out there that have taken the leap, and sometimes that's what it takes to get that evidence to prove that it works. But right now, the industry is a little skittish on the primary endpoint BYOD approach. It's typically utilized in phase 3, phase 4, even phase 2 for secondary endpoints.
All right, and we have another audience member asking, what contingency plan do you recommend other than replacement devices that require the subject to return to the site? Keep in mind trying to minimize data lost.
Yep, so data loss is a really serious topic. I mean, eCOA is data collection at its core, right? So if it can't collect data, then what is it? And that's why we've implemented a standard backup web approach for every trial that goes out the door here. So anytime a subject has a device that is not functioning properly and the help desk can't get that device functioning properly, we don't want to force them to drive back to a site that could be as far as an hour away. So we wanted to offer this web backup solution that allows them to get into a web page to collect their answers until they are able to get back to a site to have their device replaced. Now, it is a very basic web entry. It doesn't have all the complex rules that a handheld device might have, but it does allow them to get into an electronic format to answer their questions.
All right, thank you for that answer. This question here asks, is providing rewards to subjects for completing their questionnaires on time or as required a practice that regulators would look at favorably?
I have a hard time speaking to the regulatory aspect of it. We have done some gamification here at YPrime, and we have offered a reward system to patients that was by request of the sponsor. So I think as long as a sponsor is willing to do so and they believe that they're within regulatory rights, it's something that they can offer to a subject. And it really does help engage the subject a bit more. There's a lot of talk about gamification and subject interaction and engagement, and I think the reward system is just a piece of that.
Okay, thank you for that answer, Mike. I have another question for you here. How are defective devices handled in inventory and replacement?
So it is inevitable that something happens with a phone, right? I mean, everybody that has a phone has had issues with their phone or have had to return a phone. So we try our best to provide full transparency, and that's why we've developed our internal inventory system, so we can really track device defects and malfunctions along with the warranty dates that come along with the manufacturer. So we have really good relationships with our procurement companies and device manufacturers that we really rely on to get devices fixed and replaced as quickly as possible. But we still need to get a working device in a patient's hands, so we offer expedited shipping and support for replacement and defective devices.
Thanks for that answer. Another question here, is the data from BYOD accepted by the FDA? Are there any issues here?
So I've been to some conferences where sponsors have run BYOD trials and submitted their data, and it has been accepted by the FDA. They don't just kick it out because it's BYOD. As long as your data is clear and legible and follows all the same standards that the rest of the eco industry follows, I don't think that the FDA can push back too much on the submission. Now, don't quote me on that, because there's always something the FDA can push back on, but BYOD data isn't completely segregated from the rest of the eco data.
Great, thank you for that answer. And another attendee here asks, from a data privacy standpoint, what are your thoughts about patient data that may continue to be collected, say from a senior device after the clinical trial has ended? And how should that data be handled?
So that's a really good question. And it lends itself to the BYOD option because we don't get those phones back from a subject. But your app needs to be smart enough that if a subject is deactivated from a trial, the app knows to shut itself down and not continue to collect any patient data. So once that patient is done with your trial, we shouldn't be interacting with that patient anymore. So the app that they have on their phone should basically not have any information in it.
Okay, great. Thank you for that insightful answer, Mike. And we have another audience member here that asks, by using the agile development method, are you seeing a reduction in the UAT timelines?
We are. So like I said, the client's seeing things week one of their trial. So by the time they get it for UAT, they've seen it, they know it, hopefully they love it, and we don't run into many findings. So we're able to cut the week of UAT down to 1 to 3 days.
Okay, thanks for that. This viewer asks, you mentioned that you have been able to shave off around 4 weeks of your development and system delivery. So what are your timelines to deliver a system in general?
So we focus on a 6 to 10 week timeline. Now, that being said, if somebody comes to us with an expedited timeline, we're not going to turn them away. We're going to work with them to figure out how we can get things done and deliver a quality project. But our target is 6 to 10 weeks. That's the comfort zone for us, and we feel like we can deliver any project within those timelines.
Okay. And over here, another question for you. If the study is a phase 2 and data will not be submitted for label claim, but is collecting primary endpoint on BYOD, would you still have concerns about this situation?
I wouldn't have concerns outside of my typical BYOD concerns. You know, the typical eCOA BYOD concerns that are out there are the distractions from subjects using their data, the ability for them to shut off reminders and change volume and turn off alarms are the typical BYOD concerns. Now, the data that we're capturing lends itself to those concerns, especially when it's primary endpoint, because you want to ensure that subjects are entering every single data point, or as much data as we can get. So those alarms and notifications really help us get that data.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And this viewer over here asks, are we seeing the adoption of integration increase?
We are, and there are definitely some technology-forward companies out there running some of these mHealth trials. So you've seen some posts on LinkedIn with GSK running mHealth and some other sponsors adapting this type of technology. And really, like I said earlier with the BYOD, it just takes that one person to start using some new technology for everybody to follow.
All right. Well, thank you very much for those answers, Mike. That was a wonderful Q&A session. We've reached the end of the question and answer portion of this webinar. If we weren't able to attend to your questions today, the team at YPrime may try to follow up with you after the webinar. If you have further questions, please direct them to the email address showing on your screen. Thank you, everyone, for participating in today's conference. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen, and your participation is appreciated, as it will help to improve our webinars. I will be sending everybody a link in the chat box right now. You can say thanks to our speakers via Twitter using that link, so I encourage everyone to join us in thanking our speaker today, Mike Hughes. Mike, thank you very much. We hope you found this conference informative. Have a great day, everyone.